I'm excited to share the story of Stonewall on this 50th anniversary.
As June draws to a close, Pride celebrations for the LGBTQ community across the country ramp up. And it was 50 years ago this June, a riot started in a small Greenwich Village gay bar in New York City. Its name was Stonewall. And those riots ended up being the beginning of an uprising of civil rights for our nation's LGBTQ community.
It's so important to think about pre-Stonewall because certainly during that time homosexuality was illegal, people were being incarcerated, people were being institutionalized.
Dr. Karen Fredrickson Goldson is a professor and director of Healthy Generations Hartford Center of Excellence at the University of Washington in Seattle. She says before the Stonewall uprising in New York City in June of 1969, members of the LGBTQ community had no voice and little support from society in general.
People were often being harassed and in some, arrested in many cases. And so what happened really at Stonewall is they came in the very early morning, and it was a time where people had really just had enough. And they fought back.
Today, after decades of fighting for legislation and social change, things are much different. But there's still a long way to go until true equality exists in Western Washington and the rest of the country, for that matter.
There's a lot of harassment, there's a lot of discrimination, there's a lot of violence against our community.
Manny Santiago is the director of Tacoma's Rainbow Center. He says that while civil rights and acceptance for the LGBTQ community have increased in recent years, there's still incidents of harassment and even violence to the local community members.
The highest crime that we see here for the LGBTQ community in Pierce County is harassment of all forms. So it can be, just walking down the street and being harassed, and it can be employment in your place of employment and being harassed because of your sexual orientation or gender identity.
While Western Washington and most of the West Coast have a reputation for being a tolerant and open-minded region of the country, history paints a different picture, especially for the LGBTQ communities. Like most of the rest of the country, being homosexual was considered a crime prior to Stonewall in Washington state. But there was one place the local LGBTQ community could turn for help.
There was a professor in 1967 that was just pre-Stonewall here, who actually started the first organization here called the Dorian group at the Dorian House, and they were actually providing some place to socialize and some support.
And while Seattle's Dorian House is no more, there are now numerous organizations that provide a plethora of services for the community. Places like the Rainbow Center in downtown Tacoma.
The reason for the Rainbow Center is to actually connect the community to the services that they need, to advocate for the community, to celebrate our community.
While many pride parades and celebrations are happening in late June, the city of Tacoma holds its Pride Parade in July. And although it's getting to be a bigger event each year, with over 15,000 attending in 2018 and more expected to attend in 2019, there's still concern for the possibility of violence and harassment.
We are getting ready for Tacoma Pride, and one of the discussions that we have is how are we going to address any violence that might pop up during that time, right? At the time of this interview, we've received news of 3 Pride events that have been attacked by Nazi groups. And again, that's something that happened back in the 50s and 40s.
But despite those efforts of harassment and intimidation, it's really the LGBTQ community's resilience that's being celebrated 50 years after the Stonewall uprising.
I think society was shocked because up till that point, there had been a lot of invisibility. And so invisibility leads to vulnerability.
Western Washington's celebrations for the LGBTQ community don't end in June. In October, there'll be a special celebration honoring the elderly in that community and the young people who have helped as well. That'll do it for this edition of Northwest Now Digital First. I'm Chris Anderson. Thanks for watching.